A battle to the death. Classic albums clashing till there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, relate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim. When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them is one. Then it's to the semis and the final for the vinyl cassette or CD. So who will it be? We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin. Practice shot. To the hip, dip, the hop, you don't stop.
Hello and welcome to Hip Hop World Cup, the podcast that pits golden age hip hop albums against each other in a contest to find the ultimate champion. I'm your host, Danny Phillips, and joining me in our state-of-the-art studio, 60 feet beneath FIFA headquarters in Zurich, are Steve Hitchcock. How you doing, Steve?
I'm good, thanks. Hi, everybody.
Good. And James Larry Luscombe. How are you?
Hello. Oh, yeah, good, thanks.
Good. Right. So the year we are looking at in this episode is, well, it's not a year, it's 2 years actually. We've combined 2 years together for this episode, which is 1988 and 89. Why are you doing that? I hear you all asking. Well, 88 and 89 was kind of around the time when we started to get into hip hop, and we weren't sort of across all of the albums that were coming out. And I think we kind of struggled to put together a list from just one or the other of those years. So we've combined them all to get to kind of a better overview of that kind of era of hip hop. The other thing was we were going to do a 1997 episode, but decided that it weren't quite enough in that year either. So we thought, well, let's go back, let's go a bit more old school, do an 88, 89 episode that we can get some of those classic albums talked about. Guys, how are you feeling about this, looking at this era of hip hop?
I think just going to what you said then, I think it was mainly me and you, Danny, that had the problem with. I think Steve could struggle to put together a top 10 for any year, because he's always got so many albums that he likes from any year you can possibly throw at him, really.
Well, Steve's a hip hop scholar, and he's gone back and a lot of the stuff, maybe he's done his homework and he's got loads of those albums that maybe he didn't get at the time, sort of retrospectively. Is that fair, Steve?
Yeah, I definitely done that. Yeah, I like going back and looking at the old stuff. It's kind of a good schooling into where hip hop came from. And I think that there are some excellent albums in both 88 and 89. So I think it's a shame we're not doing them separately. Same with 97. I mean, Larry, you in particular, I think that's when you kind of felt that hip hop kind of went off the rails. But
yeah, I don't like that era at all.
There's really still some great albums though. There's still enough. There would still be enough to do a World Cup, but maybe another time.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that as a bonus episode one day, like the 97 episode, because there was almost enough, but it just was when we're moving away from listening to sort of hip hop as religiously as we had done. But yeah, Steve, I think we've fallen foul of me and Larry's kind of lack of knowledge in that area there. I think
I think some of the ones that were about 88, 89, I would like if I had known them at the time, but I think, like you were saying earlier, Danny, it's just very difficult to go back. Well, for me and you, it's difficult to go back and listen to that stuff now. I just feel, because like hip hop was still quite primitive at that time, wasn't it? And I think once you're used to something, it's kind of like when I don't know, if you're used to listening to like Radiohead, like to go back and listen to like Little Richard or something is like you get why it's good, but it's like, well, I'm used to something so much more sophisticated that's based on that now. It's just quite hard to go back to that old stuff, and it's like hip hop with the old, it's just very sparse and it's difficult. You kind of, when you like something, when it first comes out, you develop with it and you develop with that sound as you go along, and then jumping back to 33 years later, it's a little bit difficult, but we've done our best. And don't get me wrong, I mean, this is making it sound like we didn't like any of the albums that came out around that time. There are some absolute classics, some absolute amazing albums that came out. And I think what we've done is, by doing these 2 years together, is sort of condense it down so we get to talk about all the albums that we did kind of know and love, while giving Steve a bit of room to explore some of his personal faves.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it's the damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit. Damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit.
There's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it.
It's the damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit. Only the strong survive.
So here are the rules. Using a scientific process of shortlists and horse trading, Danny, James and Steve agree on a list of 8 albums from the chosen year, which will compete for the Hip Hop World Cup. In each round, our pundits draw the albums from a hat to decide who plays who, then discuss each match and vote for the album they want to win. Albums with the most votes progress through the rounds to the final, where the lads vote again to decide which album is the undisputed Hip Hop World Cup champion. Let the games begin.
How's True Score doing at the moment, Larry? Is it all up and running again? All good?
We fell out this week.
Oh.
I'll be honest. I fitted it with a, like these AI chips that they've got now, like the machine learning.
Yeah.
But it had I fitted like a new AI module to it, thinking it would, improve the overall experience. And when I told it some of the albums that it was going to have to listen to this week, it threw a complete hissy fit. Big Daddy Kane, and I agreed with it to an extent, but yeah, he just didn't like it at all. And that bit in The Simpsons where the machine sprouts, there's a telemarketing machine that Homer's using, it sprouts legs. Well, something quite similar to that happened, and I haven't seen it since, to be honest.
So did all smoke start coming out of it?
Yeah, there's a massive trail of oil, like a mile long down the road.
Oh right, so you're on your own. You're flying solo. You've got
flying completely solo.
Oh no.
Oh,
had to improvise.
All right, well, let's see how we get on. Okay, right, without further ado, let's go on and talk about some of the honourable mentions. And
I don't have any because I only came up with 6 to begin with. But I think there are lots of albums from these 2 years that most people would think that we're kind of quite mad for not including. There's like loads of really big names in there, like, Eric B. and Rakim, EPMD, BDP, Jungle Brothers, Third Base, which none of which I'm kind of particularly familiar with. But yeah, I can see how it raised some eyebrows that we're not featuring them. So yeah, Steve, which of those would you kind of really want in there?
Well, 2 of my favourite albums, which I'm shocked aren't in here, is Slick Rick and Cool G Rap as well, The Road to Riches. So I think those 2 are generally considered to be classic albums, and it's a real shame they're not in this World Cup. But I do listen to lots of these and go back and enjoy them. And I think you're right, Larry, that they probably are primitive in one sense of the word, but I kind of enjoy listening to them in the kind of context of that year.
Yeah.
And I can kind of like put that aside. And so, you go back and listen to Slick Rick, for example, and it does definitely sound dated, but there's so much to be said for how it moved rap forward and the storytelling aspect of rap. And he's a great rapper, and it would have been really good to have that album this year, but sadly that's the World Cup. And Rakim miss out again. And Rakim is one of the best rappers ever, and he doesn't ever seem to be able to make the World Cup. I think he was in one of our World Cups, and that was it.
It was Let the Rhythm Hit Him. We made it in, and it's one of those artists. It's like if we weren't into it at the time in a massive way, then we wouldn't have sort of developed that love for them would make us vote for them or include them in our lists now. Whereas if you polled 100 hip hop fans, quote unquote, you'd probably find it ending up in those, but you've got, like you say, you're at the mercy of our weird tastes. But there were a couple that I would have liked to see included, and one of them you might laugh at, but one of them's LL Cool J's Walking with a Panther.
I'm not laughing. I like that album.
I absolutely love that album. There's so many amazing tracks on it. It's one of the first hip hop albums I got into. I think my uncle recorded it for me, and it's just got so many great songs on there. Unfortunately, there is some absolute dross on there. He's doing his love song stuff. It's stuff that's worse than I Need Love, and they're peppered throughout the album, but it's outweighed by tons of other amazing tracks, like Nitro, I'm Dropping Them, and just there's so many good, Big Old Butt and things like that. I love those tracks. So I'd like to see that one, and I'm quite a big fan of the Cactus CD, or the Cactus album, sorry, as well, by Third Base, which was probably one of mine I would have had on my list. But there you have it. So without further ado, let's talk about the 8 that did make it into our Hip Hop World Cup for 88-89. And they are as follows. Unsurprisingly, Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. NWA, Straight Outta Compton. Continuing the NWA theme, Eazy-E's Easy Does It. Ultramagnetic MC's Critical Beatdown. Long Live the Kane by Big Daddy Kane from 88. De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising, and DOC, No One Can Do It Better. And finally, we have Ice-T's The Iceberg. Good lineup, chaps. For a year where we struggled, that's not a bad lineup of albums.
Yeah, it's quite a gangster-dominated year, isn't it? There's really kind of like 3 NWA albums in there, all really kind of Grey and DOC influenced. They're like the common denominator of those albums. And I find it really hard to choose my favourite album. They are really good albums, aren't they? But
yeah, legendary stuff in there. Not just great albums, but some legendary albums in there. So it's
very formative albums for me in there, especially as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's going to make it very, very tricky. Okay, so should we do it then? Should we get on with round 1?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So let's go on round 1 of Hip Hop World Cup 88-89.
Hip Hop World Cup, round 1. Hip Hop World Cup, round 1. Hip Hop World Cup, round 1. Hip Hop World Cup, round 1.
Welcome to round 1 of the Hip Hop World Cup 1988-89. The round 1 matches were drawn and played earlier today at the Stade de France in Paris in front of a sellout crowd. So up first out of the hat was De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising against the DOC's No One Can Do It Better. And in this one, it was a tight game. In fact, they're all quite tight games. And in this one, De La Soul won 2-1. Steve, what are your thoughts on that match and that result?
I was really disappointed these two got drawn together because I really like both of these albums, and really, really hard one to call. The DOC album is brilliant. It's a great album. He is a great rapper, isn't he? It was such a shame he had that kind of car crash, isn't it? And it crushed his larynx or something, so he can't rap anymore. But he has written so much stuff for NWA and for Death Row Records, before and after that. But before the crash, great voice, great flow. His rhymes are brilliant. He's got really kind of good cadence. He can change his kind of pace, and he's got great breath control and so many kind of quotables you get from him. And the whole album I just love. It's a great long player. There's so many good tracks. It's funky enough. Is brilliant. I like Mind Blowing, Lend Me an Ear. The beat on that is just so aggressive. I just think it's great. And the DOC and the Doctor, so many good ones.
Yeah, it is a good album, and it's funny. Like, let's come back to his rapping. I think you nailed it there. I think he's got such a real control of his rapping.
Yes.
He's relentless as well. He's like he really goes for it on every track. He just sort of absolutely fires out the lyrics, and he's a phenomenal rapper. And it was, and you just wonder what sort of things he would have gone on to do next, like, because his next album would have been probably banging that era of FL4 Zagging and all that, and Dre would have probably produced it.
Yep.
And like he would have got even better. It's a shame that we didn't kind of get that.
And there's some really good Dre production on this album as well. And I think maybe arguably this is one of the better produced of his albums in these 2 years.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because I think I just like the kind of funkier stuff.
Yeah. What do you think about Dre's production on this, Larry?
It's good. I don't think it's as good as Easy Does It, if I'm being honest. It's not an album that I've ever really. I never kind of had it at the time. I always remember I used to get confused between like the DOC and Dr Dre. I thought it was the Doc.
Yeah.
And neither medically qualified.
No, neither of them. Yeah, absolutely shameless. Trading off their credentials for all these years. I think you're right about him being like a really good rapper. He's technically like absolutely brilliant. But for me, I think actually he might have done better as a solo rapper, completely divorced from NWA, because I think all the others just outshine him. Like, as good as he is, I don't think he hasn't quite got the same command over things as Ice Cube, Dre, or Ren, and he hasn't got like Eazy-E's charisma, so he just sort of fades into the background a bit. I feel a bit sort of bad for him being part of that crowd almost. Like, I think he's sort of the worst rapper out of. He's not the worst rapper. He's a really, really competent rapper, but he's also the most forgettable out of all of them, I think.
He doesn't sound as good as the other ones, does he?
No, he just hasn't got the voice. He's technically, his flow is just fantastic. Great, lyricist, brilliant flow, but yeah, his voice just isn't quite there, really.
Do you think sometimes he gets a bit too, not carried away, but it just gets a bit hyper, and he sort of he's going too fast, and like rat-a-tat lyrics is coming out. It doesn't give you a chance to kind of sit down and consider what he said. And much in the same way, like the entire NWA, well, most of those NWA songs are memorable because you remember them, they flow so well, and they've got distinct voices. Whereas he's firing all these lyrics at you with his great technique, but it's maybe not quite as sink in quite like it should.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That's it. It's just not particularly memorable for me. I think there's only one track that I really love, which is the opening track. It's funky enough.
Yeah, that's
and the rest of them are just all sort of just quite a bit of filler on there, and a few just completely forgettable tracks as well. I think that the grand final, the last track, is basically a full NWA track, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's kind of B tier NWA. But it wouldn't be completely out of place on Straight Outta Compton, like in the second half of it or something. Yeah,
no, it totally fits in. I was going to say, this album is very similar in many ways to Eazy Does It and Straight Outta Compton. There are lots of things that he does in this album, certainly Dre does in this album, that like there's a parallel between those three albums. You can tell they were all produced at the same time, all around the same era. And also there's a track, I can't remember which one it is, but it starts out with Dre pretending that he's left his drum machine at DJ Pooh's
honestly, I was gonna mention this.
And
there
like,
are so many things like this they do.
Do you think that's true? No. I think DJ Yella came into that recording studio knowing full well he was going to play live drums on that song. Yeah.
Although this is on Eazy Does It, isn't it?
Is it? Oh, maybe.
I'm sure it is, because it's noteworthy enough that there are about 5 tracks. We'll get to it where there's just this artifice of being in the studio, and I've kind of picked up on that as well. So we can talk about that.
Let's talk about that when we get to it.
But I'm pretty sure that, because that one is on Eazy Does It. But there's probably some similar things on the DOC album as well.
Yeah, there is.
Dre was prone to that kind of thing.
Yeah, just pretending something's happening in the studio, or insisting that DJ Yella plays live drums on one of the songs. It must happen at least once on this. But I think those things aside, because those things, they really irritate me on a lot of it. But there are some absolutely amazing. There's some amazing tracks on this album, like "Lend Me an Ear." Yeah, you mentioned it, Steve.
The beat on that's brilliant.
It's such a masterpiece of sonic collage and production. Like, Dre throws everything at this song. There's so much going on. You can just hear all the different layers. It really shows like Dre's ability to just piece tracks together. I was listening to it, trying to pick out all the different samples that he's thrown in there, and like it's just there's so much in there, and that's the sort of thing he does in like a lot of the other albums, and certainly NWA's second album, things like that. He just creates these kind of densely layered
kitchen
tracks.
sink stuff.
Just throws it all in there, like, and even just making just inserting a snippet of a word into a sentence. It's just that level of detail I think is phenomenal, and there's lots of that throughout this album, but unfortunately there's some absolute crap on this album as well, unfortunately. Like Beautiful but Deadly falls foul of that whole guitar, heavy metal guitar, hip hop crossover.
That's quite thematic of quite a few of these albums. There's like Ice-T,
of course.
There's just stuff with some kind of heavy metal sort of guitar on it. They never really, apart from Walk This Way, for my money, they never really figured out how to cross over rap with guitars until really, really recently.
Yeah.
Like
and you had that Anthrax and Public Enemy thing as well, which
I never liked any of that, or Body Count.
Yeah,
I think it needs to be like, it works when it's just less obvious.
Yeah,
like LP, like the Run the Jewels producer, he uses lots of guitarists and stuff like that, but you don't really note. It's kind of just, it's not the main event. It's there to support other bits.
Yeah,
it sounds natural, whereas this just sounds like, I don't like it.
No, you're right.
Yeah, and so there's that as well, which is kind of unforgivable. Also, it's just, there are quite a few tracks where it falls foul of that kind of late 80s drum machine sound, that kind of quite primitive drum machine sounding stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of 808s.
Yeah, a lot of 808s and drum machine sounds, and just very sparse, just literally rapping over a beat. But I can't really get on board with that. I know that was very much of the time and of that style at the time, but
I do think, I mean, that is true, that a lot of rap of this era is like that, and a lot of it I don't really like, but I think Dre does it better than most people.
Yeah. So good point. So I think, for those reasons we've listed about the DOC's album, De La takes it. I think me and you, Steve, we're bigger fans of the De La album. The DOC not quite good enough to sort of topple that album. I know, Larry, you've got some thoughts on the De La
Soul
album.
It should be said, I was the one that voted for this.
Yeah, you voted for DOC. Me and Steve both voted for De La Soul, which carried it through. And we'll talk about De La later on, but I think for those reasons, DOC was a loser on this occasion.
Come on, y'all, get live, get down. Damn hot, walk up. In your town. Come on, y'all, get live, get down. Damn hot, walk up. In your town. Damn hot, walk up.
So let's move on to the second match in round one, which was Big Daddy Kane's Long Live the Kane versus Ice-T's The Iceberg. And in this one, another thrilling encounter. Ice-T won this one 2-1. I think I voted for Ice-T. Larry, you did as well. And Steve, you were the sole voice giving Big Daddy Kane the nod. And there's probably going to be a lot of hip-hop fans out there in hip-hop world going, what the hell is going on? How can Ice-T's The Iceberg beat Big Daddy Kane, who is considered to be one of the legendary figures in the hip hop world? So let's just get your thoughts on that one first of all.
I know I am absolutely fuming. I cannot believe you two have chosen the Iceberg over Big Daddy Kane's debut album, because this debut album is phenomenal. It is. You are listening to one of the greatest rappers of all time at his very, very best. And admittedly, he probably had another one decent album, then kind of faded away a bit. But on this album, he's demonstrating rapping of the very highest caliber. When you compare that to Ice-T, whose rapping is simplistic, if I'm being generous, then I cannot believe what you've done. I mean, when you look at probably all the rappers in this year, he is probably the rapper that has the best flow. I mean, he feels kind of every single beat of the record. His flow is just amazing. He can change his pace. He doesn't miss a syllable. There's no gaps, and his breath control is just incredible. And on top of that, his punchlines are just amazing. And we talked about voice. He just sounds phenomenal.
He has got a great voice.
You just hear him, you just think, this is what a rapper should sound like. I think maybe only, I don't know, Notorious B.I.G. maybe sounds better. I can't think of many people that, if I was a rapper, I'd want to kind of sound like this.
Yeah, he's got an amazing voice. He's not considered one of the GOATs for no reason. He's just an absolutely incredible.
This is what I cannot believe you haven't.
He's just one of these people. I just missed out on him at the time. I can remember hearing a couple tracks of his on like the old the rap, like Pete Tong's rap selection.
Yeah.
But I never had any of the albums. And but whenever I've tried to kind of go back to him, he's kind of like a Rakim to me. I know that they're both really, really good and really kind of well thought of, but I don't know, the beats on this for me are just quite insipid, really.
I think this album is more digestible than a Rakim album. I think, and actually the beats on here, this is like Marley Marl, basically his kind of like prime, but it's just classic 80s sound. There's no better way to describe it. You're not gonna get wowed by it, but it is classic, brilliant Marley Marl at his best. And
What's your favourite track, Steve?
Ain't No Half Stepping is the best on there.
That to me is the only good track on the album.
Oh, Larry. I mean,
or the only one then that I can come to fresh in the year of our Lord 2021 and think, that's timeless.
Yeah, that is a great track.
A lot of them, it's not that, I haven't heard it for the first time today. I know that track, and it's one of those beats that you just know because it's used by DJs for use on freestyles, and when you go to kind of hip hop nights, you'll hear this kind of track being played and sampled by other rappers as well. Those little phrases from this, but
it's the Blind Alley by the Emotions sample, isn't it? That's one of those samples you just hear time and time and time again. The Blind Alley break, it's amazing.
I mean, there are three other classic tracks on there. There's Raw and Set It Off, where his rap that is just incredible.
See, I've written 2 comments for this for the whole of the album. One is on Ain't No Half Step, and it says classic beat. Yeah. And for Set It Off, it just says the guitar sample is so annoying.
But you've got to look past just the production here and listen to him and the way that he kind of rhymes on it. I mean,
I just can't get past that guitar.
He's
quite distracting, isn't it, that guitar? Yeah. But when I take your point, Steve. That his lyrics should be what you're focusing on.
He's so full of action. His name should be a verb. He says it himself. He's just so braggadocious. His just punchlines are brilliant. If you are what you eat, then you're dope. I mean, that's just like amazing. You don't get that from.
He's got some great punchlines, hasn't he? I have to say that. When I was listening to this, I was like, yeah, that's a good line. What's the first one on there? It's something about being like Tony Tiger. Great. One of the first ones that comes in. Genius.
And you've got the Biz Marquee track on there, Just Rhyme with Biz. I mean, that's been like covered quite a few times. That's a classic track.
I was hearing like lots of little bits that have been sampled and looped, usually by Pete Rock out of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, Big Daddy Kane's a legendary rapper, and I'm not completely, against him. I own a couple of his albums. One of the first CDs I ever bought was his 1991 effort, Prince of Darkness, which I think I should really sweep under the carpet because it's not a very good album. It's practically an R&B album. And also I've got, Looks Like a Job from 93, I think, which I loved. I loved that album. But I never got into his early stuff. Like it was, as I said, it happened just before we kind of was, we knew about these albums. And I remember, I think I did have this album on cassette, and it tells you everything you need to know, that I stuffed a bit of tissue paper in the little tab.
Cassette.
Yeah, and I recorded over it, and I can't remember what I put over it. Because I didn't think I had any blank tape, so I used that. I mean, it just wasn't one of those ones that ever resonated with me, I'm afraid. And I can hear, there's some iconic tracks on there, like we say, Ain't No Half Step In, Set It Off, Raw, and all that. But I don't know, it's just a bit boring when you come into it now.
That's how I feel about it. When did you get into it, Steve?
I couldn't tell you for certain. I've been listening to it for a long time, probably 20 years.
Right.
So it's I'm not new to it. It's an album I really, really like. Those 4 classic tracks in particular, they're definitely on my kind of like playlist, constant rotation. I don't know. I think you guys like to focus more on the production. I think I'm probably more interested in the kind of rapper and the rapping.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's what it kind of boils down to. Like, I don't dislike the Iceberg, but there's such a juxtaposition between the way that Ice-T raps and the way that Big Daddy Kane raps, which I find it really hard that you haven't.
Yeah, if you're rating it on the rapping, then I'll go along with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But what's happened here, though? What's happened here is this album that you've put forward has come up against an album that had a kind of a formative, and like an emotional connection with me and Larry, or back in the day, and that unfortunately is what kind of earns our votes, regardless of where it stands in the pantheon of hip hop or whether it's sort of technically better.
But I think the Iceberg is quite well thought of, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think
was
so.
I was
yeah.
assumed.
I'm not saying it's a bad album. I'm just saying, like, when you look at Ice-T and Big Daddy Kane, and you judge them on the hip hop merits.
Yeah.
Most people would say that Big Daddy Kane is better, and perhaps the beats on this album are more hip hoppy, and they're a bit better hip hop beats. I don't know, but
yeah.
But just you can't. There's nothing you can do to fight that kind of emotional connection you have to albums sometimes, Steve. I'm afraid, and that's what's led to Iceberg knocking out Big Daddy Kane's "Long Live the Kane" on this occasion.
Yep.
Any last words on it, Steve?
Yeah, even from a production point of view, I think Africa Islam is very 80s on Iceberg. I mean, that's I just think Marley Marl is a much better producer from that era, and I'm not going to change your opinion on these albums, unfortunately. I'm just angry.
I think if you kind of polled those fictional 100 hip hop fans that we so often refer to, I think you probably get like a roughly 50-50 split of these.
You reckon?
I think so. Yeah. I think they'd say the same thing, that Big Daddy Kane is the much more able rapper. But I think there would be a lot of affection for Iceberg.
Yeah. Do you think 50% of them would have that kind of connection to the Iceberg that?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it might depend if you were like a few years older than us and were already into hip hop at this point, then maybe like perhaps you would prefer Big Daddy Kane, but Ice-T had that kind of he occupies a quite similar space to Eazy-E.
Yeah, he does.
He's charismatic, entertaining. He's the cool kind of guy that you want to that says all the crazy stuff.
Stories.
Yeah,
about drugs and guns.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much that's Ice-T's kind of audience.
Stock in trade, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's match 2. Ice-T goes through. The third match in round 1 saw Eazy-E's Easy Does It come up against the Ultramagnetic MC's Critical Beatdown, another one of Steve's darlings that's up on this list. And in this match, it's another close one. There was 4 very close matches in this one, but Eazy-E took this one 2-1, much like the last game with me and Larry voting for Eazy-E and Steve being the lone dissenting voice voting for Ultramagnetic MCs. Let's come to you first, Larry. What was it what was it about the Ultramags that sort of meant you did?
Yeah, again, it's one that I never kind of had at the time, and it's another one that I just have barely written anything about. It's scored quite low from me. I don't know how. I mean, the True Score machine had up and legged it by this point after it rated the Big Daddy Kane album. But I think, I've tried to replicate what I think True Score will come up with, and it's a 2.4 on the scale for this. I think for me, I really like the sound of Kool Keith's voice. And he's a good rapper, but he is one of those rappers to me that I just enjoy best in small doses. He's like a Busta Rhymes or somebody like that. I like to hear a little bit of him, but a full album, I've never really been able to kind of manage that. I understand also why people like the beats, but again, they're just a bit too sparse for me. It just sounds, I think, miles behind like Dre's stuff from this era. And yeah, that's all I have to say about it, really.
Well then, Steve, let's see what you've got to say about this one.
Well, to start off with, I think I found it really hard to work out what was my favourite album from these 2 years. And in the end, I decided it was this album.
All of them, of all the albums from 88, 89, this is your favourite?
Yeah, all of them. And I think the main reason, I think, is the rapping. And I know I said Big Daddy Kane is a great rapper. I think Kool Keith is an even better rapper. And mainly, I think, because of the quantity and the quality of work that he's put out since this album, really. His flow is just incredible. And Larry, I know you like the kind of like nasally rappers. He has got that kind of like nasally
He has, yeah.
voice,
Yeah,
which is
you're
really
right.
kind of different. It does make him kind of stand out. But the way he raps is so clever. He raps slow. He can rap fast. He kind of really shoots out his raps. But he's so original. He is one of a kind. There's nobody like Kool Keith, which makes him really interesting. He's innovative. He's complex. He's metaphoric. It's kind of like, would we have Ghostface Killer without Kool Keith? Because of the way that he just kind of like spouts out so much kind of weirdness. But
Yeah.
he's just always on beat. Every single track on this album, his rhymes just fit the beats just so kind of perfectly. And again, I'm going to go back to to comparing him to Eazy-E. You can't compare the two. Kool Keith is like he's Premier League. Eazy is like Vauxhall Conference when it comes to kind of rapping. He doesn't even write his own rhymes. It's just, he's got that kind of like, I don't know, kudos or shock value. But Kool Keith is a proper rapper. Eazy is not really. I mean,
Eazy-E literally is not a proper rapper. He has to have his lines. He has to do it line by line, and to have like they would do it line by line, punch in and out. I think they'd probably have to like the DOC would lay down like a guide vocal first for him to rap over. Like, he is not a rapper by any stretch of the imagination. And it does kind of, like, hearing you talk about Kool Keith, like all of those things you say about him are definitely true, and it surprises me that I don't like him more. But
yeah, I think you'd like him more if you listen to more of his stuff. Kool Keith has appeared on about 20 odd albums, 30 albums. I mean, it's just ridiculous, really.
Yeah, I don't like it. I know that you love Dr. Otta, whatever. Yeah, I tried listening to that again today. It's just like, I just don't get what people like about it. Just do not like it.
The genius album. But the thing, I think the thing about this album that made me want to say this is my favorite album from these 2 years, it's the album that I wanted to play at the loudest volume. And I just love like the funky samples. I just like, Said G's not the best producer ever, but again, it's another kind of very 80s album, but it's a real kind of head nodder. And I just think this is underappreciated. I think it needs to be listened to a few times to kind of appreciate it. And I'm so frustrated that these albums don't get through.
I know it is really, really highly regarded by proper sort of hip hop heads.
Oh, it's Hall of Fame stuff, really, which makes it all the more frustrating that, obviously having listened to it, I wasn't there when it happened, and I didn't get to appreciate that fully when it first came out, because I get the impression it would have probably been an album I would have loved, but it's one of those that you need to be there at the time and grow with it. All I can do is just read you the notes I made on it. Say Me.
Yeah.
Too old school. I don't really know what that means, but it's too old school for me. Yeah. And there's one good track. I thought there's one really good standout track, which is Give the Drummer Some, which, funnily enough, is the only one not produced by Said G. It's produced by Paul C. And I've written Prodigy samples. I heard a few vocal samples on the Prodigy.
I was going to say, actually, he has got such a good voice that it's perfect for sampling on stuff like that, like with the old, change my pitch up kind of. That,
I'll take your brains to another dimension.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, so I heard those. So those are my notes on it, really. I just I was listening to it, just like being unable to determine one track from another, appreciating that they're rapping in quite the rapping's fairly good, and I imagine it was quite groundbreaking at the time, and he was probably he's obviously very well regarded, and Ultramag's right up there, Hall of Fame famous, but I just couldn't get into it. And so, but I kind of do feel a bit guilty about voting for Eazy-E, because it was just based on the fact I know the album better. Well, I don't actually like Eazy does it that much. I have to be perfectly honest with you.
That makes it even worse.
Yeah, I know. As an album, I just don't really like it very much. I never have done. So I can share my thoughts on that later on a bit more when we get to it in the semis. But so I feel for you, Steve, really, on this one. But we'll get one of your albums for you one of these days. I promise.
Well, I don't know what to say, really. I mean, it is the World Cup, isn't it? I mean, this is what you kind of come up against. You watch your favourite team in front of the TV and they never kind of win. It's like watching England.
Exactly. Well put.
Ladies and gentlemen,
It's the damn high World Cup. It's the damn high World Cup. Only the strong survive. It's the damn high World Cup.
Let's round this round one up then with the fourth match, which was, this is an absolute heavyweight tie. I can't even believe I'm saying this as a round one game. NWA's Straight Outta Compton versus Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. How on earth these two are meeting each other?
You would want this to be in the final, really, wouldn't you? I think.
This is your final. So somebody is going home early that shouldn't be. But you can't do anything about how these names come out of the hat. That's just pot luck. I don't know who wants to start with this one. Larry, why don't you give us your thoughts on this? First of all, I should say that it was a win for NWA, 2-1, with Steve and Larry both voting for NWA, and I went for Public Enemy on that one.
Well, why don't you lead with why you voted for Public Enemy?
Yeah, good point. Well, where do I start? Okay, so as you know, I absolutely adore NWA, but I've never been a massive fan of Straight Outta Compton. For me, it's a good side. It's got side A is an amazing side. The second side lets it down, and I don't think as a cohesive kind of whole project, it's as good an album, anywhere near as good as That Takes Nation Millions.
Yep.
So Public Enemy has got absolute amazing classic tracks all the way through it. From the first track, Bring the Noise, Can't Believe the Hype, Cold Lamping with Flavor, Louder Than a Bomb. It's just all the way through to Rebel Without a Pause. Whereas NWA, great first half, second half is just full of those drum machine beats, quite boring, quite empty, quite sparse, without the memorability, if that's a word, of the first half. But having said that, the first few tracks on Straight Outta Compton are possibly the greatest collection of songs anywhere in hip hop for me.
It could be the first best 3 tracks ever.
Let's absolutely.
Let's not forget we're not talking about NWA now, though. Are
no,
we?
We're not
because they won. But
and I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but that's what made it so difficult for me, is because those amazing tracks on the first side weighed up against the whole of Public Enemy's album. That made it hard, because those tracks on NWA are good enough to make any album amazing. So but I had to go with what is the better, kind of more consistent album, and I went for Public Enemy, which I feel is more iconic. I think Bring the Noise is just one of the great. I know it's not the first opening track, but it's one of the best opening songs of all time. I do not trust anyone who doesn't know all the words to Bring the Noise. Don't fully trust them as a person. If you're a hip hop head, if you know what you're talking about, you know all the words to Bring the Noise. Don't Believe the Hype is just Mount Rushmore of hip hop songs, and all the way through. And it's got that quality about it that I get from NWA's second album, where it gives me the chills as I listen to it. I put it on in the car, I'm driving along, hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Chuck D's voice, the bits where they cut the beat out and it's just his voice booming over at the end of a line. The chaotic Bomb Squad production, samples thrown in there, densely layered. I don't have a clue what Chuck's going on about, but it sounds fantastic. And all the way through, I think it's actually, I don't know, I've probably said in a previous episode that Fear of a Black Planet is my favourite Public Enemy album. I'm not so sure. I think this might be, I don't know, just because of the effect it has on me. Just so many great moments, and it's all the way through. They're just absolute classics all the way through this album. And I'm not alone in thinking this album's incredible. It's probably considered the best hip hop album of all time. Would you agree? And it's
kind of it's like it's this or Illmatic, isn't it? That most people would put as their
and actually
that kind of objectively, most people you wouldn't get a lot of argument out of people saying it's either this or Illmatic, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So, which surprises me slightly that you two went for NWA, because I don't know why, I just thought you two both preferred the Public Enemy album.
Well, I did vote for Public Enemy first, and then I reassessed once I'd actually listened to both albums, because my instinct was to go for Public Enemy just because it's more serious. It's political. It's kind of political revolutionary music basically that also makes it to not just the top hip hop albums, but you'll find this in like Rolling Stone's
absolutely
100 best albums ever, like right up there with kind of, you know, the best, like with Beatles albums and stuff like that.
Yeah, seminal, iconic. You know, it's beyond a rap album, as you say.
Yeah.
It's more than that.
This is where I've got to come in, because I definitely have kind of a personal thing going on where I just don't see that. And you know, from previous podcasts, you know that I've said this before. It just doesn't resonate with me. I don't get the kind of style and the vibe of the Public Enemy albums. I wouldn't put them in my top 100. I wouldn't put them in my top 10. And on this album, the tracks that you mentioned, Danny, I really like. Bring the Noise, Don't Believe the Hype. I like Black Steel on the Hour of Chaos. That's a great track. And I love Rebel Without a Pause. And when Chuck's kind of like rhyming like he is on there, I think, yeah, this is great. But I just, if I'm being really objective, I just don't think he raps like that all the time. And I think people kind of get on the Public Enemy bandwagon, and actually I don't think they're as great as they're made out to be. I hate to say it, I'm just not. I'm not.
I sort of know what I know what you're getting at, but I think when I think about tracks like Caught, Can I Get a Witness? I think he's great on that.
Yeah.
She Watched Channel Zero.
Another one of those guitar
bass heads. Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos.
He's so good incredible. On those. Just She Watched Channel Zero. Another one of those guitar rap.
But that's a good one though.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's brilliant. I think that's is that Pantera, I think, or
is it? I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
I might be wrong.
It just doesn't do it for me.
No. Well, that's fair enough.
I probably haven't said enough about this album, actually. I would just like to say a little bit more about it.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fair enough. Go on.
Because I think, I want to justify, but, you know, I want to kind of get across that I do really, really love this album. And it was a big decision to put NWA in ahead of this. I think like this and Straight Outta Compton were the first two rap albums I ever heard. NWA was first and this was second, and Danny, I think you must have had the exact same trajectory as me. For ages, the only tape I had was a C90 tape that had the Bomb the Bass album, half of Straight Out of Compton, and the first three tracks from this. Yeah. So for ages, like this album cut out like halfway through Cold Lamping with Flavor.
Right, yeah.
And I only it was only like maybe like a year or so later that I think I must have like taped the rest of it off you.
That's literally track 4.
Yes, yeah. And whenever, like, it's one of those things, it's just stuck in my mind. I know exactly when it cuts off.
Yeah.
And I will always hear it. I can never unhear that.
When you listen to about the full track, I'm with you. I've got loads of albums like
and
that.
I've got a really similar one with NWA Shout Out Compton, actually. Yeah. But I think like with this, I can remember, given that, I mean, I won't tie you with the same brush, I know you weren't, but about, you know, maybe 6 or 9 months before this, I was listening to like New Kids on the Block and really enjoying that music, and then kind of discovered this kind of stuff. And the difference, like, this just blows your head off as a sort of 10 or 11-year-old to hear this for the first time. The fact that it had, like, you know, air raid sirens in the opening, in the intro and stuff, it's just kind of the kind of stuff that I thought, well, how is this like part of music?
Yeah,
they just sounded so abrasive and odd compared to all the kind of pop stuff that I was used to. It's just get that kind of incredible like endorphin rush of listening to it for the first time that you never.
That's how it gets you.
Kind of get over. Really, it's just
that's how it grabs you, and that's why, you know, you have devoted hip hop fans. It's things like that that grab you. It's so different.
Yeah,
so attention grabbing.
Even just like that Terminator X to the Edge of Panic, like that bit at the beginning where he cuts up like the Flash Gordon theme. I used to get so excited by that kind of transform scratch. In that, you know what I mean, where it's sort of it kind of cuts it in and out. I that used to just blow my mind hearing that. And it's just like, prior to that, like, just the sound of scratching is such a cool thing to hear
Yeah.
for the first time. And I probably heard it before this, I'm sure.
I was going to say, I'm sure New Kids on the Block were using a few scratches and some of that stuff.
Yeah, it was
appropriated
it was a bit of a trope by then,
Yeah.
but just like scratching is just one of those things that sounds so good.
Yeah.
And there's loads of really good scratching on this. I don't think Terminator X actually did a lot of it himself. But if you read the liner notes, there's someone who's credited as like a rhythm scratcher.
Oh, right. Did Terminator X do anything?
I don't think so. No, I mean, he looked really cool, didn't he?
He looked really cool. Yeah, I think he might have just be like a stooge. He was just drafted in,
like a figurehead, kind of like a totem sort of thing.
Yeah.
Also, just on the kind of on the negative tip, Party for Your Right, which is just awful. It's got a really weedy guitar sample that sounds like it's from a Mega Drive game.
Yeah.
Just horrible.
They've pitched it about, haven't they, to create kind of a melody with it. Yeah.
But this is a great album. It's like you say, it's really, really, really consistent. And the only reason really that NWA got it for me is that the tracks that I just love a bit more than the tracks on here. And actually, some of it I just find a little bit dull. As Steve was kind of alluding to, Chuck D isn't 100% full throttle Chuck D on all of these tracks. Like, he can tread water a little bit sometimes, and
he's a bit too, I don't know, maybe he's a little bit too cerebral, whereas NWA is pure entertainment.
Exactly. You can understand what they're talking about. Like we've said several times on this podcast with Chuck D, like, I haven't got a clue what he's on about half the time.
Whereas, you look like NWA is like watching Casino, and Public Enemy is like watching Once Upon a Time in America.
Yeah.
It's one's more entertaining than the other. One's popcorn, the other's a bit more thinky.
More nutritional. There's more nutrients in Public Enemy.
Yeah, I think so. So the lineup for the semi-finals is De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising, Ice-T's The Iceberg, Eazy's Easy Does It, and NWA Straight Outta Compton.
Semi-final. Semi-final. Who's that going to be? World Cup. Semi-final. World Cup.
Welcome back. You join us here pitch side at the Stade de France in Paris, where we are about to watch the semi-finals of the Hip Hop World Cup 1988-89 play out before our very eyes. Steve, you're about to make the draw for the semi-finals. Who have you got with you there?
Decided for this week to get somebody a bit more kind of football related, actually, Danny. And so I was trying to find out some of the rappers that actually played football. And I came up with a couple. The Game. You probably won't know who he is because he's probably like...
I know who The Game is, thank you very much. Yeah, there's a couple of tracks of his I love,
50 Cent, apparently a good athlete. And Wyclef Jean. They were all very, very expensive.
Not proper football, though.
Well, this is where you're not going to believe. In fact, have a guess. Who do you think I might have got then? So this is an absolute iconic rapping footballer.
I reckon. I know that Puff Daddy liked Crystal Palace because he thought it was a really blingy name.
Is it Puff Daddy?
Not Puff Daddy, no.
Ian Wright. Oh, no, Andy Cole.
No, although Andy Cole did release a hip-hop track.
He did,
didn't he? Yeah,
outstanding.
Yeah, that's a bit crazy.
Who is it then, Steve? Come on, let's introduce him. Who have we got?
It's John Barnes.
Oh, of course.
Oh, he's my guest for later. which is kind of handy because he can just do it live.
Yeah. There can be no excuses now, can there? For
In fact, you've just reminded me that I forgot to say that he's coming up later on, which is great because he can just do it live, and we won't have any of those phone problems.
No technical
we normally have.
He's right there.
Although,
hang on though, because normally we don't have the license to broadcast their voice or images when Steve's doing the draw with them, do we? So how would that work?
Just nod your head, John. John, are you happy for us to interview you later? I think he's nodding. He's nodding. That's fine. Okay, then let's.
Is that a can of Lucasade Sport you've got there, John?
Isotonic. John?
He can't say anything. Just
What's he doing?
Kicking it into a bin, I think.
All right. Well, do you want to ask him to get on with it then, Steve?
yeah, keep going then.
The ball's coming out.
So the ball's coming out. First one out of the hat is ball number 1, which is De La Soul
Okay.
against the Iceberg.
De La Soul. They couldn't two diametrically opposed artists there against each other. De La Soul versus Ice-T. And so the other match, we know what it is, but do you want to make it official?
Well, yeah, this is obviously a very interesting matchup between Eazy-E and, it's really NWA against NWA.
Oh, you could not write it. You could not make that up, could you? Absolutely extraordinary.
That's the romance of the cup, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That is a big tie, isn't it?
It's like Sheffield United drawn against Sheffield Wednesday
Yeah.
in the
Gosh,
semi-finals of the Worthington Cup. So let's start talking about that one then. The first match, De La Soul versus the Iceberg. I mean, Larry, give us your thoughts on that matchup.
Well, I'll tell you about De La Soul and what I think about that one, because this is going to not go down very well with Steve at all. I went into this one sort of, thinking, I like the singles, but the rest of it just isn't for me. But actually, having listened to it, I came away thinking of it apart from those singles, which are exemplary. I think this is probably the most overrated hip-hop album in all of history.
Hot take, Klaxon.
Yeah. It's just, just so boring. Such a boring album.
Wow. Okay. Well, I kind of think, like, Larry, I didn't used to like this album. I think I probably would subscribe to the same kind of view you've got at the moment, because it's quite a easy going, easy listening album. It's almost like a mainstream. This is what you say if you listen to rock and indie. If you pretend that you like hip hop, it's like, oh yeah, I like De La Soul.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Listening back to it, I actually do like this album.
It's the hip hop album for non-hip hop fans.
Yeah, it's long and it's laden with. I mean, they kind of ushered in the era of skits, didn't they? And they just didn't do them well from day one. And I think when we were talking about De La Soul is Dead, I think Danny said something like it kind of feels like they're telling a private joke that you're not in on. And I think I really feel that on this, just with all the kind of little skits. It's just...
Well, actually, do you know what, Larry? You're really worrying me now, because, going back to listen to this album, I used to hate the skits in it because they just to ruin it. But actually, I made a note for this saying, actually, you know what? I don't think the skits annoy me anymore. And actually, so now I'm really worried that I've got the wrong idea about this album.
So what is it you do love about this album then, Steve?
I think it's actually out of place in 1989. It doesn't feel like a 1989 album when you listen to the rest of the albums that we've chosen.
That's really true. That it's original. I can't deny them that.
But actually, I also think it's a really refined album. I think Prince Paul is actually an excellent producer. I really like his stuff, and I like Prince of Prince of Thieves,
Prince Among Thieves,
Prince Among Thieves,
Prince Among Men. Oh, yeah.
Robin Hood, Prince of Tides.
Yeah.
But this is actually a very original album. It's fresh and it is fun, and I think maybe when I've listened to it before, I've had kind of more of a listening of more kind of hardcore late 90s, early 2000 hip hop, and that's maybe why I haven't appreciated it as much. But going back to this one now, I mean, yeah, of course, the singles that you said, Larry, are really good. Say No Go, it's what a beat. That is an amazing beat, an amazing sample, and actually, as an album, this is where the best rapping happens on Say No Go. But then I Know is a real head nodder.
I think I Know is just an absolute, mastery of sample collage.
Yeah.
The way they fit those tracks together is just better, as good as anything that the Bomb Squad ever did, just in a different sonic palette.
It's perfect, isn't it? Absolutely. It's just so instant. You can see why it was a pop hit. because it's got all the right ingredients that it's memorable, and everything just gels together so beautifully.
And that's the thing that worries me, is that pop hits I used to kind of avoid. I used to avoid albums and artists that had pop hits on.
Well, but they're pop hits because they're good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Often.
But I guess also this is the antithesis of straight out of Compton, the DOC, Ice Cube, and Ice-T, and Eazy-E. But when I really looked at this album, none of the rhymes really kind of stand out in the same way that Big Daddy Kane or Cool Keith really stand out. Yeah. They're kind of like melodic, and they do flow nicely. And Posdnuos is definitely the better rapper. He probably raps more than Trugoy, but
it's quite forgettable.
I'm really doubting
rapping,
myself. It is forgettable rapping, definitely. I'm really kind of doubting myself maybe now about how much I like this album.
Yeah, you're doing what I did with De La Soul Is Dead. You think you like this album, and you know you like this album from previous experience or knowledge, and then you actually think about it and consider it, and you realise that you didn't like it quite as much as you thought you did.
I think, I mean, some people absolutely love De La. I don't know, like our mate Rob's a big De La fan. We were kind of always more Tribe. But I think if this album didn't have those standout singles on it, I just wonder if you ever would have heard from them again.
I don't think you'd have ever heard of them again.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely idea.
But listen, all right, okay, so I'm like you. I think, in fact, I've written a little rhyme that sums it up.
Oh, okay.
Packed with hits, but too many skits.
Yeah.
Basically, that's how I break it down.
There's
so many great tracks on it. Like we said, The Magic Number, I Know, Say No Go, Me, Myself and I. Right, that's just the singles, and you've got all the other ones. Buddy, well, that was a single as well. But there's so many great, good stuff on here. But as an album listening experience, it's too convoluted. It's quite hard work to get through all those skits. I think if you condensed it down, same thing as what we said about their second album, you'd have a really, really solid album. Even all the other the proper songs, condense all of them down onto an album, I think you might have a much stronger proposition. But I do like all these a lot of the singles. I like the production. I think Prince Paul is very innovative. Like we said, it's not like anything that you'd heard before it came out. The sort of origin of the samples, where he's sampling from, not a lot of people were taking those sort of samples. It was all James Brown and funk and that sort of stuff, but he's taking things like the Turtles and there's other like more
Steely Dan
hippie-ish type samples. And I think it's really innovative, really different, and I think that's what's helped it stand the test of time among the hip hop lovers. Just how different it was ahead of its time. I think that's a really good observation.
Yeah.
And
but Dan, if I'm going to be devil's advocate here, your rhyme, packed with hits, or was it too many skits?
Too many skits.
That's really like how Ice-T raps. It's quite simplistic, and so
yeah, but he's got no skits on it though, apart from Black and Decker.
You've got a really kind of cohesive.
Yeah, but Ice-T's got style though. He's got kind of a weird charisma, like that like De La completely. For me, just don't have that. They just, I don't know, the kind of, a lot of their stuff was just wrapped up in their like visual image as well, I think, which they obviously kind of didn't. They kind of went on to say that they kind of regretted that, I think, but I don't know. It's to me, it's I know this is rich coming from from me, but it's a white middle class kind of students album. Do you know what I mean? It's the kind of album that if people that wouldn't have dared listen to Public Enemy or NWA at the time, this comes along and it's kind of okay to listen to.
Yeah. Larry, I've never heard anyone say before that, but that is
not. And I mean, I am of those three things. I am only white. I was never a student. I'm not middle class, but
it's the hip hop album. It's okay to listen to, and was okay to listen to back then. Yeah,
and probably like our wives would recognise songs from it.
Absolutely, but none of this should really detract from the quality of some of the stuff on this album. I mean, we need to we're looking down on it, we're talking down about it, but there is some absolute timeless stuff on this album that I don't think it would be fair to overlook. But I do think there's so much good stuff on this album. It's not considered a classic for no reason.
Yeah, if I'm going to be really fair to this album, it is ahead of itself production wise. Maybe only I've said this, but I think lots of the albums here sound like they're in the 80s. This doesn't necessarily sound like it's in the 80s. You could argue this was an early 90s album, which I think is a credit to Prince Paul more than anything else. It's really quite refined in how it sounds.
Yeah, no, I'll go along with that. It's quite advanced, and I don't know whether you could say the same thing about the Iceberg. Is it a particularly progressive album? Probably not. It's it's a continuation of what Ice-T was doing on his previous albums in terms of production and subject matter, but it was obviously working. And I think this album just has a real personal attachment for me. Like I say, it was among those little first cluster of albums that I listened to. I had it recorded on like a C90 tape, and it was one of those sort of secret albums that was like illicit tapes that you had back in the day that was passed around the classroom, and we used to listen to it on the back of the bus on school trips and stuff. And it was one of those things. It was almost like stumbling upon, I don't know, just something you weren't supposed to be listening to, or like it wasn't allowed. It was, your parents didn't know you had it, and so you had things like, the Iceberg, let's say, with the title track with the sex rhymes and stuff like that. And like you were listening to it, God, I hope my mum and dad don't hear me listening to this and stuff like that. And that was the appeal of this album for me. Yeah. It was almost like you had this thing that you weren't supposed to be listening to. But on top of that, the rhymes were so good. And the way he delivers them, and the beats. I mean, the beat on the Iceberg, I just love that sample.
Yeah,
it's great.
Oh, it's great, isn't it?
But I love it. So it's almost like cartoony.
It's really kind of sleazy kind of sounding, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, like we said in the previous, it's also sampled by Run DMC and
of course,
the Avenue, which is a great track. Just a great sample, and I think we used a really good effect on this, to the point where I can recite all of the rhymes on that track.
I think I will take these like lyrics to the grave with me, like these ridiculous stories about like Donald D, and Charlie Jam.
It's so memorable. It's timeless. That one track is so good. But then it carries on with stuff like You Played Yourself, which I loved. It used samples The Boss by James Brown. A girl tried to kill me, which is again another one of those guitar heavy metal tracks, hybrids. But again, it just because the subject matter is so funny, and he's doing it with his tongue firmly in cheek, it kind of works. And then you get into the sort of the second half, Hit the Deck. This one's for me. You get into more kind of classic 80s drum machine-y kind of up tempo, quite thin sounding hip-hop.
It's front loaded. Definitely
it's front loaded. It falls off a little bit, but there's still enough stuff there to kind of make this album appeal to me. And then he obviously gets the freedom of speech, where he starts talking about the whole Tipper Gore and C. Dolores Tucker thing about them getting outraged about hip hop, and they're trying to deny them freedom of speech and things like that. So I think there's a little bit of a conscious rap going on there. He's not just all about guns and drugs and stuff. So so I think on the whole, the Iceberg, it's just one of those albums I just absolutely love and will always love. And so what do you think about this one, the Iceberg?
I'm the same. I think it's like it puts its best tracks up front and center up until about The Girl Tried to Kill Me, and after that it's sort of downhill a bit. But I think just to those tracks like the Iceberg and The Girl Tried to Kill Me, it kind of came at that time of life when you were just kind of starting to realize that there was such a thing as sex. And to hear and for one of your early introductions to that subject to be these kind of songs, it just kind of made it sound like terrifying somehow, and like
unrealistic expectations.
Didn't understand some of the things that he was kind of saying.
It set you up.
It was only like a year or two that I was like, oh right, that's what he meant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is, for those reasons, the sort of subject matter. This is an album designed to be passed around the classroom on a hissy C90.
Definitely.
It's because this is the sort of thing that happens with a lot of these albums. NWA, Eazy-E, they came out around the time we were getting into hip hop. We were of that age where we were finding out about some of these things, and the way we were introduced to these albums on those tapes being passed around, it kind of influenced how we felt about them, to the point where it feels weird listening to them on a crisp digital CD these days.
Yeah, it's got to be nice and hissy.
It's got to be nice and hissy. You've only got to listen to the first 5 tracks because that was all you had on the first side of the C90. And the way you get introduced to these things says a lot about your feelings towards them. And I think that's happened to at least 3 of these albums here, because we were of that age when they came out.
Yeah.
Steve, what do you think about the Iceberg?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't listened to it until recently, and I do like it. I think Ice-T is he's not an exception rapper, but the way he kind of rhymes is quite simple, but it really works for him, because I think, like you said earlier, Larry, I think he's got the charisma to kind of like pull it off. And when he goes slow and simple, it really works. And there's some times when he kind of goes a bit faster, it just doesn't kind of like work for me. And he's kind of like, he's really in his stride on this album. This is his 3rd album. He's kind of really revved up, and it's just like good standard Ice-T for me.
It's his best album, I think, for me.
I think so. Yeah, it's between this and OG, but
I don't know. I also love the start of this album. Shut Up, Be Happy. It's just
it's brilliant, isn't it? So memorable.
That's Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Black Sabbath. Yeah. I used to love the way it came in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so right. Well, should we vote then, gents? I mean, it's about that time.
Just before we get to that, I meant to mention this when we were talking about the DOC. The DOC and Ice-T have something in common. Do you know what that is? It's something that's very famous about Ice-T that also applies to the DOC.
Go on.
It is. They are both called Tracy. Not only that, but they both also have girls' middle names as well. I always knew that Ice-T was called Tracy Marrow. He's called Tracy Lauren Marrow. And
what were his parents thinking?
I have no idea. And then the DOC is called Tracy Lynn something.
Right.
What is it about?
Like life isn't hard enough in South Central LA.
Yeah. There's obviously something about the name Tracy, because there's these two. There's Tracy Morgan as well.
Yeah. Tracy obviously isn't just a girl's name in America, much like Hillary or Vivian aren't here. It's one of those things. Maybe they don't find it quite as funny in America as we do here. The idea of a man being called Tracy.
Ice-T is one of the hardest rappers in my opinion. If I wouldn't want to meet him going down a dark alley.
No. All right, so let's vote on this one. De La Soul versus the Iceberg. Larry, what are you going for?
100% Iceberg on this one.
Steve.
Oh, crikey. Well, before we did the World Cup, I would have said De La Soul. Now I'm not so sure. Okay, I am going to say De La Soul, and I think the reason I'm going to say it is because I just think it is a more refined, innovative, forward-thinking album. And I think I always have to come back to what album would I like to take away on a desert island? Is it Iceberg or 3 Feet High? I think it would be 3 Feet High, so I'll go for that.
Okay, so that's 1-1. So I've got the casting vote here.
The very thought of being on a desert island with 3 feet high and rising.
I know it's not a great thought, but I think I'd rather have that than the Iceberg, unfortunately.
Yeah, you wouldn't have anything to play it on, but you just have the CD.
I would know more of the tunes in my head, so that's a good point. So definitely De La Soul.
Yeah, I think it probably won't surprise you to learn that I'm going to go for Ice-T, the Iceberg as well. I feel like I'm betraying the hip hop community, who probably all love De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising. It's a Hall of Fame album.
They think they like 3 Feet High and
like
Rising. If they actually listen to it,
yeah.
So it's all well and good looking at that really cool cover on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
But when you're actually listening to it, it's a different matter.
Yeah, and if you just said to somebody, those 100 hip hop fans again, we're putting the Iceberg through over De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising. What do you think about that? We would probably get run out of town with pitchforks and torches, but I just have an emotional connection to the Iceberg that I don't have to De La Soul, and they didn't help themselves by putting too many skits on that album. So I think, I'm going Iceberg, which means that Ice-T sails through to the Hip Hop World Cup final.
Hip Hop
on to the big one, the second semi-final in the Hip Hop World Cup. It weighs heavy on my shoulders to even say it, but it's Eazy Does It versus NWA's Straight Outta Compton. Two albums very much in the same mould, probably recorded not too far apart. Steve, this is a big moment, and I think you need to start on this one. The Voice of Sanity.
Yeah, thank you for coming to me first, because I don't know which way to go with this one. So you two are definitely the kind of NWA experts here. So let me just give a quick rundown on what I think about both albums. So Eazy Does It first of all. So like I said earlier, it is really an NWA album, isn't it? It's quite a short album. It's difficult. I think, like, on this album, MC Ren is the best rapper. It's
on
like,
Eazy-E's album or on NWA?
I think Eazy is definitely like. We've already kind of said this. He gets his rhymes spoon fed to him. He probably practices them and raps them. But I think like Ruthless Villain is probably my favourite track on there, and that's because it's MC Ren rapping, and I don't know, that kind of makes me think, is this really an Eazy album?
It says something, doesn't it, when he devotes a whole track, Ruthless Villain, isn't it? It's just MC Ren on it.
Yeah.
On his own album, he lets MC Ren have a whole track.
Yeah. And it is a really good track. I mean, there's lots of quotable stuff on there. And then he's also kind of got the Boys in the Hood remix on there, which is kind of like regurgitating stuff. And then there's like a couple of tracks on there I think maybe like too, I don't know, self-indulgent, because you've got Eazy Does It and We Want Easy, which are kind of like nice, kind of like, I don't know, they're a bit more kind of uplifting, well, not uplifting, maybe it's not right, up tempo, but slightly more kind of happier tunes from your kind of like normal gangster stuff that you kind of get. So I don't know, yeah, it's a tricky one. And then I think we need to probably have the most debate about Straight Outta Compton, because we haven't really talked about the fact that this is probably the best 3 tracks that any album has. I think.
Yeah. What's your history of this album, Steve?
This is an album that I listened to when I was probably about 13, and it was in Jamie Daveridge's house. And he said, "I've got this NWA album." I was like, "Who's NWA?" And he told me what it stood for, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I got it from Danny." And it's like, okay, let's listen to it. And it was what you're saying, right? It was literally mind blowing, And I've gone from like listening to like KLF and just like pop stuff to like then hearing NWA. It is like you go through this like threshold of your like listening, like you said earlier, Larry. That was so kind of like reminiscent of what happened to me.
Yeah.
And when you hear F the Police for the first time, you're like,
are they allowed to say that? Yeah.
Are they allowed to do this? Is that even possible for that to happen? And I think there is more happening in those first 3 tracks of Straight Outta Compton than there is in so many albums in total, because you've got, I mean, Ice Cube and Dr Dre are really the kind of strength of those 3 tracks, because Ice Cube goes first on all 3 of those tracks.
Yeah.
Like Straight Outta Compton is an absolute classic, and I think if the 3 of us were able to do some karaoke, we would rap that all the way through without any problem. But the Amen break on that track is just amazing. And Ice Cube is just phenomenal. And then you get Ren coming in, and then you get Eazy-E coming in. It's just amazing. It's
incredible. So just going back to the bit where you said about like knowing all the words to it. Like I was walking around the park earlier on, walking the dog, and I was just refreshing my memory of this album, and every single word, and I was walking around, I must have looked like some absolute simpleton walking around sort of doing the lyrics as I was walking around next to a play park, which wasn't good rapping this album, but it's so memorable. The lyrics are just so memorable. It's like if you're a hip hop fan, you know all the lyrics to the first 3 songs in this album.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I think once you get Straight Outta Compton out of the way, then you go into F the Police, and then Ice Cube absolutely kills it on the first verse. It's just like I mean, I don't think that song would be so popular if Ice Cube hadn't gone first and with all those kind of memorable lyrics.
Yeah.
And then he does the same on Gangsta Gangsta. I mean, that is he just raps all the way through that.
It's the three, honestly, Gangsta Gangsta, his lyrics on that.
That's my favourite track on the album, I think.
And also the actual hook. So there's a bit before the actual chorus. I'm the type of person that's built to last. That bit. Yeah. That's just, I mean, that is genius. Because you remember it. It's memorable.
Little bridge.
Yeah. And then it goes into the actual chorus. But the rest of the verses is just brilliant as well.
But what's even better, though, is the end, Danny, when you get to that bit where it kind of goes into that Ohio Players sample, and then Eazy comes in.
Yeah. And his voice is so perfectly matched to that sample as well.
Yeah. It's just an absolute masterclass. Those 3 tracks are just holy grail hip-hop tracks, 3 in a row. And to have that at the start of your album, it's just, it blows my mind, really.
I mean, this is the first album we ever heard, wasn't it, Danny?
It was. We were, again, coming back to the old hearing things on a hissy C90, being passed around the classroom. It was straight out of Compton, F the Police, Gangsta Gangsta. I think it might have gone down as far as If It Ain't Rough or Parental Discretion is Advised. I think it was I think it had the first 5 tracks on there.
The tape that I had went up as far as something like that, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just, in my head, I had it that it was the first 5 tracks on there. For that reason, that's kind of influenced my opinions about this album as a whole going forward.
Yeah. Sorry, Compton's in the house. We had it up to Compton's in the house, yeah.
All right. So, this is how we were introduced to it. It was passed around. This was one of our first sort of introductions to the world of hip hop, and like it was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Like we would sort of go around to each other's house and just go, have you heard this? Like listening to it on those little cassette players, mini cassette players.
Well, I had like a little single cassette kind of recorder, as you know, Danny. We used to record stuff on little skits onto it. But I had that, and I had a I don't know where I got it from, but I had like a headphone that was just one earpiece. It was like a mono earpiece, really rubbish. And I remember listening to that album in my room, making sure the door was shut, on my little earpiece with the volume all the way down, like terrified that my dad would hear it, because I think I actually thought it was like some kind of like illegal tape.
Yeah.
Because all the stuff they were saying, like boasting about murdering people and selling drugs and stuff like that. Like how you weren't allowed to do that on a record, surely, so it must be illegal. And
exactly, and right there, and right there is the reason it's so popular. That's the reason why it endures. That's why it was seared into our memories, because it was unlike anything we'd ever heard before.
Yeah, but when you say that, but when we take it into the context of the whole of rap, those first 3 tracks are phenomenal, and we were lucky to be able to listen to 3 tracks that were like,
completely, totally agree with that.
I will say though, to me, I think it's a bit of a kind of trope that only the first 3 tracks are any good. I like this album all the way through. There's a few kind of obviously not all of them are as good as the first 3, but you're all solid 5 out of 5s. But If It Ain't Rough is really good. Parental Discretion is Advised is really good. 8 Ball I love. Express Yourself is a classic. I Ain't the One I really like. That kind of sounds like something that could have been on America's Most Wanted.
Yeah,
I think really like that. Dope Man's really good. I like it. I like it pretty much all of it. I can listen to it all the way through, and it does trail off, but it's all good. Those first 3 are just standouts, and it wouldn't surprise me if those first 3 were recorded last. They're just more advanced sounding.
Yeah.
I definitely don't feel like that. I think the first 4 tracks are brilliant, and Express Yourself it is great as well. The rest of it is kind of just okay or forgettable, and I don't know. I think the fact that it's such a groundbreaking album and everything is kind of so shocking and well produced on there kind of like mitigates against the fact that some of those tracks aren't as good as they perhaps you want it to be
There are some on there that are filler, definitely. Sort of Compton's in the House and Quiet on the Set are just sort of, you could do without those, but most of them I love. I'll tell you what, one thing that always stuck in my mind is on Parental Discretion is Advised. You've got that bit right at the end where one of them shouts shut the F up.
Yeah.
And I always assumed when we first got that, because the tape that we got was from our friend Richard's cousin who lived in Warrington. And I always assumed it was him, like shouting at the end, like as you sort of would sometimes just put something on a tape that you'd made for somebody. I thought it was, or like for ages, I thought it was him kind of doing that until I got the CD, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's the perfect album for a, you know, what were we, 11, 12-year-old to listen to. It's just, you know, it's mind-blowing for kids of that age to listen to something like that, because it's like the secret thing that you know, it's almost
so
illicit.
Taboo, isn't it?
Yeah, so taboo, but it just that increased the you know, the status of this album. It increased how you felt about it. I mean, but you know, go back to what you said, Larry, about it only the first 3 tracks being good. I'd go as far, I'd say it was up to parental discretion as advised. And after that, for me personally, and this is why I've never loved it as much as I love their second album, it tails off. Like, I don't like 8 Ball, I don't like something like that. Especially so obviously classic. Compton in the House, don't like that.
Yeah.
I Ain't the One's okay. And then Dope Man, Quiet on the Set, Something to Dance to. No, thank you. So I just, there's not enough, it's not sustained enough all the way through the album for me to consider this, you know, one of my favourite albums. I always thought it was a slightly controversial opinion that I had, that I don't really like this album, like that as an album.
I think a lot of people feel that way, that it's front loaded with those 3 tracks, and it definitely is. But for me personally, I still like a lot of the rest of it as well. Yeah, no,
I'm with you. I can go up to the first 5 because parental discretion is advised. That was on the tape that we had, and so it was just so familiar to me. And that's another one of those pretend live tracks where they're playing the live drums and stuff. You know, so it's not, you know, I don't love it, but there's the good stuff on here is really good, like all-time favorites. So in terms of, you know, how it compares with Eazy-E's album, I mean, as I said earlier, I generally don't really like this Eazy-E album. It's another one of those that we heard on a tape, passed around from our friends, and like obviously Still Talking, Nobody Move, are brilliant. They're so good. They are that classic kind of really naughty Dr Dre track that he produced. Eazy-E doing his thing, and you know, hearing those for the first time, I used to love them, thinking, oh, this is amazing. And I think the album just tails off. I mean, the only good ones going forward are like for me are like We Want, maybe Radio. But again, there's too many of those drum machine tracks, very of his time, very dated, haven't aged very well.
So I think they're better than most of the other albums at the time that kind of employed similar tactics, though.
Yeah, they might, maybe.
I think Dre just elevates it a bit
generally more. I don't really like that sound. I don't like that sound with the hard drum machines and sort of empty with nothing behind them, no music. Well, little music behind them, or maybe just one stab or something. I can't really get on board with that sort of hip hop as much as I can. Some of the sort of the more fuller tracks that are on Straight Outta Compton, you know, where there's lots of production going on, lots of music, live bass line and stuff like that. It's a bit empty, a bit sparse. And I really never loved Eazy Does It. So this is going to be quite an easy one for me to vote on.
So I just found it again. It's not as good as Straight Outta Compton, but for me, it's a little bit like it's better than DOC. I think. Would you kind of Would you go along with that?
I'd go along with that. I think
it's got the better beats and the more charismatic rapper. I always really liked the intro to it. It sounded really kind of creepy. It had that I think it's like a Parliament sample, isn't it? Right at the beginning.
It's got
that
like
sort
the
of
organ.
And it's got like a woman kind of making a weird sort of wailing noise. It just sounds really odd, and like, oh, what the hell is this?
I think even the one that I do, even the ones I do like, Still Talking, that it keeps getting interrupted by that. They keeps cutting to them chatting around like they're old black men sat around on the stoop. You know, doing those impressions of those like old uncles or whatever it is.
I really like that.
I don't know. It's fun, but even that just sort of detracts a little bit. For me, I don't know. I don't really like. I don't love.
I think that adds to it. It's just like a classic sort of Dre trick of adding sort of just these little production kind of embellishments that he kind of puts into things, and they're you know, really kind of well done, as the kind of, you know, like the court scene in like F the Police.
That
kind of thing. But
it's a good example of Dre's work. So, are we ready to vote then, chaps?
Let's do it.
Okay, all right. So let's start with. Well, I'm going to go first this time. I think I'm going to go for NWA straight out of Compton. It's an easy one for me. Steve.
Yep, same for me.
Yeah, Larry.
Yeah, it is NWA for me. I mean, Eazy Does It scored pretty high for me. The second highest kind of scoring of all of the albums apart from NWA, actually. But yeah, I have to go with Straight Outta Compton for it. It's a similar album, but much better.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there we have it. That's your Hip Hop World Cup final for 88-89. We've got Ice-T's The Iceberg against NWA Straight Outta Compton. Okay, welcome back. You join us here pitchside once again at the Stade de France in Paris. We're about to witness the Hip Hop World Cup final between Ice-T, Tracy Marrow, and NWA's Straight Outta Compton. Gentlemen, it's been a great World Cup so far, hasn't it? A lot of great music we've talked about.
There's some controversies.
Some heated debates. It's been great. But it's all come down to this now. This final, Ice-T's The Iceberg versus NWA Straight Outta Compton. Should we get straight into it then? Steve, how do you think these two compare, these albums?
Well, it's hard to know what to say really, because I didn't expect either of these albums to get to the final. I kind of thought Straight Outta Compton might have a bit of a chance. They're both kind of gangster rap albums.
It's a good point, isn't it? Like, you wouldn't have if you had said to anyone you wouldn't expect Ice-T's The Iceberg to get through. And I think much like England's progress through the Russia World Cup in 2018, it's come up against some, it's had a good route. It's had a kind route through. I think it's benefited from perhaps NWA and PE meeting in the first round, kind of snuck through.
And Ice-T surprises me all the time. He's not one of my favourite rappers, but he does seem to do better than I expect. So it's nice to see him in the final. I just think NWA have got the firepower with their tracks and their rappers and their producers. I think this is going to be pretty one-sided, really. I can't see any way that
The thing is, it's not really a fair matchup, is it? Like, you've got one good rapper up against like 5 good rappers and the best producer.
Yeah, well, he didn't really stand a chance, did he? Ice-T.
Yeah. Who is the best NWA rapper? Because I don't think that Eazy-E is like, I don't know, he is charismatic and he's kind of like quirky and different, but I don't think he's a great rapper.
I'm going to say, I think we can rule out Eazy-E being the best rapper in NWA.
Who is the best rapper then? Because
all right, let's drill down on it then. So, who do you think it is?
Well, I'm guessing it's going to be, you're going to say Ice Cube, but I'm not Ice Cube's biggest fan. I mean, MC Ren sounds quite good, but then whenever Dr Dre raps, he always sounds good. But then
I love Dr Dre on the mic.
It's not fair. It's not fair choosing Dr Dre because he doesn't write his own raps. It's like,
yeah, but he still delivers them in a really good way.
Yeah,
he does. To be honest, I think if you said to me who would you rather hear rapping, Ice Cube or Dr Dre, I'd probably say Dr Dre.
Yeah. So are you saying Dr Dre's the best rapper in NWA?
He's not the best rapper because he doesn't write his own raps. So I'm going to say Ice Cube.
Okay. I think there's some the purists out there. They might just go for MC Ren because he's always been he gone under the radar, but he's a very, very competent MC, and he really comes into his own on the second album. But I think on the first album, I think you're going to be really hard pushed to find anyone that would say Ice Cube isn't the best rapper.
Yeah. Of
the group on that album. He commands every track. The first 3 tracks are amazing because of him.
Amazing. They are amazing.
But mostly because of him. His verses are the ones you mostly remember. Like when it got to some of the bits of Ren's, I got lost a bit. And Eazy, I don't remember them all, but Ice Cube's are the memorable ones. And he delivers it with such authority. It's got to be Ice Cube.
His skill, Ice Cube versus Ice-T as well. I mean, the skill that Ice Cube can bring to his rhymes, to his delivery, he's just such a more complex, skilled rapper.
I'll tell you what, Ice-T can't hold a candle to any of them. He's
No.
they're light years ahead, aren't they?
They are, and like
even like Dr. Dre.
Yeah,
He's a much better rapper than us.
Absolutely, much better than Ice-T. But you know, if it's a rap competition, just rapping, then yeah, I mean, Ice-T doesn't even come anywhere near any of them.
Also, production, Africa.
Production.
Nowhere near Dr. Dre. Nowhere near.
Yeah.
I do really like the stuff on the Iceberg though. There's some really good beats on there. I like we said earlier, the Iceberg's got a great sample.
Yeah,
really good track.
Funky.
I love the beat on Lethal Weapon. It's kind of really hyped up kind of thing. You Played Yourself, another great track, like production wise. Peel the Caps Back has got that sort of really nice atmospheric kind of like John Carpenter horror type of vibe to it. There's loads of really memorable sounding tracks on there, I think.
I agree. There's a couple that kind of remind me of the sort of thing that we might have made if we had the equipment back in
maybe
in that era. So I think it might maybe Lethal Weapon. Like it's just the bass line. It kind of reminds me of something sort of
it's a bit Mega Drive, isn't it?
It's a bit Mega Drive. But I'll tell you one thing I do like is
I like it.
You know, I mentioned Black and Decker earlier on that skit.
Yeah.
The sound effect they get of the drill going in. Like, what the hell did they do to get that? That's absolutely out of this world. As much as we love the Iceberg, I don't think it can hold a candle to NWA.
No.
Really. And I think this might be a foregone conclusion. But should we do it anyway? Should we vote? Should we make it official?
Yeah.
Steve, what are you voting for? And why?
I'm just going to have my parting shot before I vote. So it is a travesty that we've got one of the worst rappers and worst producers in the final when we have some of the best producers and best rappers that didn't make the final. So it's an easy choice for me, NWA.
Larry?
I need to defend Africa Islam a little bit from Steve's angry tirade there. I think like half of the tracks on this album are really good. One thing I did want to ask, actually, Danny, you probably know about this, but the people that Ice-T references, Donald D, Charlie Jam, Eazy-E, Beatmaster B, do they have their own like albums? Are they actually like?
Donald D did.
Actual,
Donald D had an album out. I think it was in like 91 or something, and he had a song on the Trespass soundtrack.
Right.
The movie that starred Ice-T and Ice Cube.
Yeah.
But besides that, I certainly don't think Beatmaster B had an album out. I know Eazy-E was Ice-T's DJ, so I'm
of course,
pretty sure that he didn't have any his own material, unless it's an album of him just scratching stuff.
Yeah.
So no, I don't really know. I mean, they might have gone on to bigger and better things, and they might have been, might have gone behind the scenes and started being like huge music
lawyers or something.
Yeah. Well,
like
A&Rs and stuff.
Like the guy out of Bros, Craig out of Bros.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know is the answer to that question. But let's hope they did well for themselves.
I hope so. I'd like to think Charlie Jam's done quite well for himself.
Yeah, despite what he got up to in that song.
Exactly, yeah. On a ski lift.
Yeah. So, I'm going to vote for NWA out of those two as well. Have you both voted? I can't remember.
I haven't, but I'm going to go for NWA. I think, it has to be, doesn't it?
It has to be, really. As much as we love the Iceberg and the attachment we have to it, I think NWA is, on the whole, a better album, more iconic, and just the first 3 tracks alone probably, are enough to elevate it. So there we have it. 3-0 win for NWA in our Hip Hop World Cup 1988-89 edition.
Quick addendum: Charlie Jam has 3 credits, and they're all on Ice-T albums.
Really,
according to Discogs, anyway.
So none of his own material.
Don't think it made it.
Shame. Wasted talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wasted talent. Okay, well, so our winner then is NWA Straight Outta Compton, and joining us in the studio there with Steve now, and he's allowed to talk, thank goodness, is to discuss our winning album and talk about his illustrious career, is ex-England winger John Barnes. John,
Hi, how you doing?
thanks for joining us. You famously, obviously, rapped yourself on Liverpool's Anfield rap, a seminal work in itself, and then obviously you went on to rap on the iconic World in Motion by New Order. But what I wanted to ask you is, how much did NWA Straight Outta Compton influence you on those two verses?
Well, first of all, I mean, it was incredible, and keeps it.
John,
Once again, you
that might, I think we got. I'm having a few problems with John's mic. Steve, can you just adjust it, just see if there's anything?
Football. Yeah, do you want me to give him my microphone? Will that help?
Oh no, we're not legally not allowed to. It's in his contract.
This new isotonic leukocyte support.
This honestly, this is so frustrating. I had about 10 questions lined up to ask him. Now he's walked off.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got really angry with me then.
Oh well, sorry lads, another failed interview. I don't really know what to say.
Well, we've got one more attempt at it, haven't we? Next time.
Yeah, we have to do it next time. I tell you what, I've got an absolutely phenomenal interview lined up for our season finale show.
Can you guarantee they're gonna actually say something?
I can't promise you anything. All I can do is book the talent and hope they turn up. Whatever happens after that is a bit of a lottery.
Technically,
listen, guys. I know we haven't had much luck, but we are the last show is going to be an absolute amazing experience. Please trust me. Trust me. All right. Well, that disappointment aside, listen. If you agree with us or disagree, you want to vent your outrage at our winner, you want to ask us why the hell Ice-T's The Iceberg got through to our World Cup final, or you just want to share your thoughts on 90s hip hop in general, then please do hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at Hip Hop World Cup. But for now, thanks for listening, and until the next episode, we are ghosts like Patrick Swayze. Peace.
A battle to the death. Classic albums clash until there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, we slate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim. When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them is won. Then it's to the semis and the final for the final cassette or CD. So who will it be? We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin.
It gets to your thirst fast.